And it really is kind of unfair that the children have to kind of be stuck in here. They just open presents probably, and they're all jacked up. Why are we here? Maybe that's you, which is okay if that is you. If you have a hard time hearing, I would recommend let's pour into here. If you can hear me and I'm projecting, well then sit down for me. But I wanted to, well, there's a couple things. I kind of have this planned sermon and then the not planned sermon. And the Lord was doing this thing with me last night till 2 in the morning. And trying to fit this together. So if it feels a little disjointed, it's because it is. If it feels a little sharp, it's because I haven't been able to process it and, kind of digest it for you for a little bit. And then when I was here, I came and, when you kind of have something set in your mind, like, I call it railroad tracks. That's kind of how Levine and I process things. Like if you make a plan, you do the, you check out, make sure everything's great, you lay your tracks, and then you get the big heavy tray and you just keep rolling through. I had railroad tracks for this morning last night where I was like, hey, I got to get there at 8 o'clock, I got to refine this thing, maybe put together a PowerPoint, something, and then you get here and you're like, oh man, the snow. So much snow. I was joking with Brian. It was like, man, they didn't give us snow shoveling classes in Bible school. But how many of you know that when you're called to leadership, you serve? That's what He's called us to do. That's what being in leadership means. And so it was good to serve. But as I was shoveling, the Lord was speaking to me, and so you'll have to bear with me as I kind of go through this sermon. He was speaking to me about my shoes. So I got these new kicks. How many of you guys, you get something? Like Chris, guys, not ladies, you probably don't do this, but guys. How many of you guys have like a pair of shoes that you really liked, or a jacket that you just can't throw away, or a sweater that's been in your dresser for 20 years? Anybody else, or is that just me? I can't throw stuff away. I have a real hard time doing that. So we were talking with Lavina this morning, going through presents and all that stuff, and she's like, hey, throw your shoes away. You got new ones. Because she watched me open my new ones. They're very comfortable, they're wonderful, they're pretty sharp. I mean, these ones are they got air holes. You know what I mean? So, I found out earlier, before it started to snow, that my socks were getting wet wearing these things. I was like, what the heck? Yeah, it's because there's air holes. See, that's from a man who has saved a pair of shoes well past their time. So I'm gonna do this. Can someone grab me a garbage? Anyone grab me a garbage can? Just around there.
Oh no.
So
We are going to witness
this is dual. This is bi-functional type stuff happening here. So the Lord was saying, Marty, you know what? Listen to your wife. So what the Lord was speaking to me though was, this is the last Sunday of this year. And He was saying that this is the last Sunday of a chapter that we as Strasbourg Alliance Church are in. And I love what you said in practice, that we ended off with this year with blessing it, and we're going to start the year up next Sunday with the blessing. And I think it was exactly what the Lord was speaking to me, because He was saying that those shoes were great. I loved those shoes. They were easy to slip on, they were great in the summer, they were great in the winter, and then when they got a little bit too worn down, they were great office shoes. I could wear my rubber boots in, slip into the office shoes, and they served a purpose. They had their time. The Lord started to speak to me about the new wineskin. And He said the new wineskin's ready, Mark. I don't know if you guys recognize or can appreciate it. Maybe you do. Maybe you're the type that just, Ray, do you love your new shoes that you got? She does love her new shoes. She couldn't wait to toss the other ones out. But maybe you guys are like Ray, where you're just ready to rock the new shoes. And you've been praying for the new wineskin and the new wine that comes from His presence. Maybe you're like me. Maybe it is actually really hard for you to drop them shoes in that garbage can. You don't waste not one, right? But when the Lord speaks, we're called to obey. When the King speaks, we're called to say yes to Him. That's our response. And so I want to encourage you before I get into what I wanted to share with you, but I want to encourage you. I feel like the Lord is saying, this next week, whether you're fasting or praying or however you're pursuing Him, January 1st, 2023 is going to represent leaving the desert in some ways and going to the promised land. And it's not like we didn't come from a promised land. Maybe it's from, like it says in the New Testament, from glory to glory. So it's not necessarily the old is bad. It's just we're shifting. It's time to use the new wineskin. And you know what? We don't always know how they're going to feel. How's this going to go? You don't know how it's going to look, how it's going to feel, and that's okay. Because the line that struck me here, and you ever get to that stage when you're about to cry, but you don't cry because you're a man and you just kind of get it in there, but there's that like quivering facial thing that goes on? That was happening today, but every time Val's saying, there's that. In His presence, there's peace. So you guys are blessed, you're favored. And this is really a kind of a generic hybrid of two sermons for you. With a message you could probably preach to any church in North America. For many of us in North America, or even in the West, Christmas has become a time where we spend too much and we give gifts to people who maybe don't always need them or want them or appreciate them. The message of Christmas becomes further and further removed from the story of Jesus. For much of society, and is replaced by a notion of family and gift giving. We just added an O, right? We go from things that are God to good. Those are good things. Family and gift giving, these are all terrific things. Gift giving is one of my love languages. I feel incredibly loved when I receive a gift. I've always felt that way. And even if it's just like a kid folding up a paper airplane for you, you just get that. It brings life. And those are good things. Every year, the Christmas decorations and music gets wheeled out. This year, we don't have quite as many trees as we did last year. I don't know if you noticed that or not. We're inundated and bombarded with marketing strategies to buy this and to get that, and it's just something that is just constantly on the fronts of our minds. It seems that the pretense of Christmas is about anything other than the acquisition of more stuff in a culture at large which is being swiftly abandoned. No longer is Christmas the season about the arrival of the living God in the flesh, in the person of Jesus Christ. Society has forgotten this. The world around us has forgotten this. They boldly refuse to serve or honor God in this or in any other season for that matter. I'm not much of a music guy, but I kind of know some old songs. I don't know if anybody knows who Bob Dylan is. Bob Dylan had this line in there that stuck out that says, "You've got to serve someone." And in our culture, when they're stuck with that truth, they're stuck in it. We as people, we're stuck with, we serve something, someone, inevitably. There's no problems, there's no questions about that. You will serve somebody or something. Rather than serving the living God, oftentimes our Western mindset, and honestly it's becoming a global thing, they've chosen to serve what maybe some of us would call a new God to worship. Kind of the God of consumerism. I would suggest to you that this is not a new God, that this is an old God who, with a small g, I'll add that. It's something that we have, as humanity, has placed close to our heart. We've surrounded our heart with these things. It goes back to Genesis 3, where we, as humanity, replaced God as our everything, and we tried to replace Him with ourselves, so that we could be self-sustaining and well, like the enemy said when he was tricking Eve, he didn't mean that. He just meant that you'll be like Him. You'll know the difference between good and evil. You'll be just like God. Consumerism and this promise to be just like God, it promises increasing happiness. Oftentimes with a growing stash of things which it cannot provide. It promises well-being and contentment which it cannot provide. And it promises security and control which ultimately will never provide you with. Consumerism, this concept that an ever-expanding consumption of goods is advantageous to the community, to the economy, to the masses. It is not. Matthew 6:24 says, "No man, no woman, no child, no one can serve two masters. For either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." So what is the reason for the season? As they say. I want to read to you, we're in the Advent, we finished the Advent. This is kind of the closure of Advent. And as I light these candles, and we go over kind of the sermons that we've heard, and thank you, actually, Byron. He's been kind of encountering a bunch of technical difficulties because we all love technology. He's been doing a great job getting them up on YouTube. So if you don't get a chance to watch, we will be working on that and getting that going. You might have missed one or two. I think the one that Byron preached, we got a lot of really great visual, no audio. But if you do need, go online. There's some great sermons on there that we've covered. But as we close the Advent and Christmas, I've been still going through the church year, and I'm actually finishing up here with this last book. And part of some of the stuff that I wanted to, I really would have just been content to actually pull up a chair and read you this chapter. Have you ever read a book that it's just so powerful and it just catches you? So I want to read to you here that over the Christian calendar we're moving into the Christmas part of things and celebrating what some would call the Feast of the Nativity. And so I'm not sure, does anybody know what the term, how to define nativity? Does anybody know the definition? Because I didn't. It's the nativity, right? It's the nativity scene. But what it is actually it's the occasion of a person's birth. The place of my nativity would be a way to use that term. The place of my nativity, this occasion, the context in which one came to earth. And so this is, when we get to Christmas, we celebrate the nativity, right? Capital T, because Jesus, He's the first among many brethren. He's the living God come down to the flesh to dwell amongst us. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And He came down and He dwelt among us. He dwelt for us, with us. And so I want to read to you this chapter here, or not this chapter, this paragraph, where the author, Steve Beltock, says, "My friend Alana wrote an elegant song simply titled Glory. that captures the wonder of a revelation almost too bright for human eyes. For if indeed the sovereign of the cosmos, in order to communicate his truest nature and the content of his love, would condescend to the form of a child born into lowly, obscure circumstance, first announced to uncouth and unwashed shepherds, then we have to completely reboot our all too human understanding of the word glory, or majesty, or power, or authority. It simply changes everything. For God's glory is here revealed as power of love, humbly, percolating from the bottom up, rather than from the raw power imposed from the top down. God's ways are different than our ways. God's thoughts are different than our thoughts. And being called into the kingdom, being kingdom-minded church, and well, I'll tell you, family, 2023, that's what the Lord's calling us into. What does it mean to be a kingdom-minded, born-again Christian? Being kingdom-minded. When I was reading, studying for yesterday's short little encouragement in Luke 2, I get caught up in the historical stuff. I really love history. I loved it. I love reading about it because you kind of wonder, what would it be like to, if the Roman centurions were walking around with the helmets and the breastplates and sandals instead of all the technology. What would it be like? And you start reading about it, and you recognize that there's no really difference between the way they were then and the way we are now as humans. I want to read to you from Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Also, a really great book. I love reading this book. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, and yet the sea is never full. To the place where streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. And this is where the Lord was highlighting this for me. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. When we read, oftentimes, the Old Testament, and we get into the New Testament, we read about them, we read about the children of Israel. Man, how could they ever go astray from the Lord so quickly after they part the Red Sea, and after, He does all these miracles and signs and wonders and all these amazing things, and it's like not even weeks later they're taking all the gold that they were blessed with as they were leaving the city so that they could provide for their trip into the Promised Land, and they're turning it into a giant golden cow worship, right? It's like it didn't even take them long. It wouldn't have taken us long. If we don't, part of that broken and contrite heart that I talked about yesterday is that recognition that as much as we have the dignity of being born and being created and being molded in God's image, we also carry this depravity of humanity that we're each and every one of us. This is why love is so absolutely imperative that we grasp a hold of this. Why love is the key. And with that, forgiveness. We have to walk in forgiveness because we're no different. The same sin that beguiles you and keeps you up at night, the same sin that tears apart at your family, the same sins that keep you separated and lonely and isolated and anxious about the future, those same sins that you're wrestling with, and somehow I'm still here standing behind a pulpit preaching to you. Thank the Lord for what He's done. But for Jesus, we are all in the same boat. That's why unity is so important. That's why humility is so integral to the fact of us going forward as the living bricks, the living stones to what He's creating in Strasbourg. Pausing and considering somebody, your brother or your sister, better than yourselves. Sacrificially giving of your time, resources, your tears. We cry with you, it's stressful. Paul says we're to mourn with those who mourn and celebrate with those who celebrate. Seems like kind of an emotional roller coaster for a guy who likes to kind of stay in that copacetic zone. It gets like exhausting when you're like, oh yeah, wedding, everyone's happy, hey, everyone's happy, oh, hey, your house. You know, all these different things that happen, and yet He's called us to do that together. That's the mortar that keeps that building together. The second and last chapter, or paragraph that I want to read in this book by Steve Bell, says in his book, The Triumph of Christianity, sociologist Rodney Stark claims that the most outlandish and revolutionary phrase written in the 1st century Rome was that God so loved the world. Words attributed to Jesus in the Gospel of John, Stark argues that the pagan world would not have had a catcher's mitt for such a phrase as this. The gods, as they were understood, did not love the world. They used the world. They were not worshipped for their virtue or their character, but rather they were ceremoniously placated for the reasons of personal gain, for revenge, for conquest, and for safety. The legends of the gods, all too human characteristics of selfishness, the gods portrayed pride, lust, greed. And this is one I had to look. I had a couple words. I love reading books that just stretch my vocabulary because I like learning new words. So rapaciousness. So to be rapacious. Anybody know it? I got ice cream for anybody who knows this one. Rapacious. No? All right, good. You don't need ice cream. You had all those Christmas treats. Being aggressively greedy. And then the next one is this ice cream. I'll extend the ice cream offer for this next one. Skullduggery. Duggery. Uh-oh. I might be taking you out for ice cream. Do you know what it means?
Sorry, no, I'm not going to eat mine.
You're not going to cake. Well, sometimes you probably know what it means. It's underhandedness, unscrupulous, trickery. So to have those things, these gods, they characterize those and our legion, and worship pandered to these base instincts. People of this time would not have had categories for the idea of a God whose basic orientation was other-centered, self-donating, and love. Yet this is the clear message of Christmas. The early Christians understood in practical terms that if God so loved the world, then so must they. Which accounts for the formation of the early Christian communities, how they lived so selflessly in solidarity with the suffering, rather than creating fortresses that offered escape. That was hard for me to read this week. It was hard for me to read this week. It might have been hard for you to hear that. Because there's this, we oftentimes I feel like at least for myself, in my head, I bounce back and forth between, but the Lord's blessed me, right? How can I be a blessing and help others if I'm not blessed? True. And yet it's like, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and He'll provide all these things for you. And if we want to, actually, let's go to that. Anybody know where that's from? Matthew chapter 6. I like it. Matthew 6:33 is the one I was thinking of, but I'm going to read to you 30. And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers in the field grow? They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that even Solomon in all his splendor was not dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow thrown into the fire, will He not do much more? Will He not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So don't worry about and say, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them. And this is where it is. But seek first the kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Money represents, in a lot of ways, although it's just a tool, we often read these we give money these attributes that it is not meant to carry: security and provision and happiness. Then, much like many of those who passed before us, and those who are around us, and those who are to come, we begin to serve money. We are devoted to we become devoted to it completely, like it said in Matthew 6:24. It will begin to reflect that we serve what God we serve, and the fact that money is cold and without feeling, oftentimes our heart can begin to reflect that. It's funny how you model and you exhibit and you exude what we worship. And I could go into the woes of the love of money, right? Because that's the root of all evil, like Paul said, the love of money. Not money itself, but the love of money. Where we hope that it's the bringer of joy, the deep and pervading, where oftentimes you've even seen stories and heard testimonies of lottery winners who wish they had never won the lottery. Happiness, which is caused by something except happiness is not like joy. Joy is the emotion of great delight. Unlike happiness, it is caused by something exceptionally good and satisfying, and it has keen pleasure and elation. But it can be found where someone is lacking. It can be found in some of the most destitute of places. Joy is there for you. And we heard a sermon on joy not that long ago, and so I won't preach on that. But we do need to recognize that our pursuit of lowercase g gods, specifically in this case consumerism and this stuff, is not the bringer of happiness. Happiness is fleeting. It's not the bringer of security. There's only security in Christ. It's an illusion, an insurance. It's like locked doors. As a police officer, I learned something. Locked doors are for honest people. They're not for the criminally minded. We need His truth in love, and sometimes that's hard. But what we need is Jesus. We need to focus on the author and the finisher of our faith. Our first priority in life should be relationship with God and living in a way that reflects this relationship. If we really look first to the things of God and seek to make choices in how we treat others and handle life's issues and life's blessings, we will fulfill the great commandment. We are called to love God and to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Christmas must be about honoring God. We must put our gifts and meals, family gatherings in their correct place. Good, but not at the top of our worship and not at the top of our focus. Christmas is the season where we should celebrate the arrival of a vulnerable baby that would forever change and impact creation, the creation that he loved. It represents the extreme actions of a loving God to reach and redeem his stubborn and fallen creation. In truth, Christmas represents what consumerism and wealth and prosperity and property and power could never do. It represents the arrival of the news of great joy, of a kind of peace which does not and has not existed since the fall of man without Jesus. Peace between fallen mankind and God himself through the redeeming work of a baby that would someday be completed on a cross. So I want to bless you today as you go home. Enjoy your family. Enjoy the gifts that he's given you. All good things come from our Father of lights. He's blessed you. He wants you to enjoy it. But it's just that reminder that those things that we enjoy are the things that bring us true joy, true meaning. Those aren't the things that give us purpose. Those aren't the things that one day we'll get to walk for eternity in the cool of the night and talk with the Lord that loves you so much. And the reminder that 2023, kingdom-minded is what we're called to be. Ask the Lord, what does that mean for you? How is that for you in the job that you do, the family that you're in, the city that you live in, the farm that you're working, the retirement, the grandchildren, the children, the parents? How does that impact you at hockey? How does that impact you in the grocery store? What does it mean to be kingdom-minded? Like Matthew 6:33 says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Bless you. I'm going to pray, and you guys feel free to visit or feel free to run home and do what you got to do today. So, Father God, I thank you for every man, woman, and child in this building. I thank you for the running and the chaos. I thank you for family that's come from afar, that's here. Lord, help us to bask in the presence of their presence. And we thank you for them. We thank you for the people and the blessings you've placed in our lives. Help us to soak that up. Jesus, I pray a blessing on each and every person here, God. The blessing of open eyes and open ears. That they would see and hear your voice. They would see the look of love and favor that you have on them this day. And that they would be able to walk in confidence of who they are in you. We pray this thing in your wonderful and powerful name. Amen.